Thank you all for coming tonight. Gentle reminder one more time that this session is for our rising sophomores, current first year students. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining tonight. My name is Krista Jones and I'm the Assistant Director for Housing Assignments. Tonight we will be talking about the housing application for the 22-23 academic year, and specifically we'll be focusing on our rising sophomore students and what their process looks like and what they can look forward to from the QuadX philosophy. So we will go ahead and get started first with some guidelines. So this session is being recorded and we will have it available on our website and on our housing portal likely tomorrow. So if you need to duck out for some reason and can't stay for the whole session, you can certainly catch up on the recording. For any questions, we have a few panelists that are here joining us tonight, also from the Housing Assignments team. That is MJ Williams, who's the Director for Housing Assignments, and Nicole Mitchell, who's our staff specialist. If you have questions, I ask that you please message them directly and ask your question and they'll be able to assist you. I ask that you please do not message me. I likely will not see it until after the session has concluded. So please, if you can, if you have questions, send them directly to Nicole Mitchell or MJ Williams. You're also welcome to email us at housing@duke.edu and we can certainly respond to you via email as well. And just so you know, all participant videos are turned off and you are also muted. All right, so for our agenda tonight, we will be going over the application and housing assignment timeline. We'll talk specifically about Quad Connections. We will discuss roommates and blocks and what that means for our rising sophomores. We'll take a look at the application and provide a pretty thorough overview. We will also discuss various living area options within each quad, and we'll start diving into more specific information for some of our different populations, whether that's selective living group members, living learning community members, etc. So the first column there from timeline to the application overview, that is relevant information for everybody, regardless of what other membership or status you may hold. And then the latter part of the session, we will talk more specifically about some specific populations and what their process might look like. We'll also discuss if you have a housing accommodation, what does that mean for the process, and then where else to learn more. So first, for the application timeline, it does open on February 7th at 10 a.m. Eastern, and it closes on February 14th at 12 p.m. Eastern. That endpoint is really critical to remember. Once it closes on the 14th at 12, you will not be able to edit or access the application any longer. Things will be quite locked and unable to change at that point in time. So we'll talk more about what components are important to focus on in the application, but you'll want to make sure that everything is exactly as you need it on February 14th at 12 p.m. When the application does open, however, you can make as many changes as you need, so feel free to go back to the housing portal and access the application as often as you might need to. So once the application closes, we'll start communicating with students directly if we have questions about their application or something isn't lining up. But in early March, we'll start communicating with everyone who submitted a housing application regarding the self-assign or room selection. If you hear either of those words, self-assign or room selection, they're referencing the same process. But all students will be selecting their own room through the online portal, through the housing portal. So in early March, we'll be start emailing, talking about the self-assign process, what to expect, what it will look like for you. Um, and so that will start coming in early March. And then in April, the week of March 21st, you'll actually select your room online. And then the week of April 8th, you will confirm your housing assignment and select your meal plan. Quad connections. So if you are not aware of where your quad connection currently is, you can see them here. So with QuadX, this new model, every building on East Campus is linking to another quad on West Campus. And in this graphic, you can see which buildings are coupled together, paired together, and linking together over to West. Bassett Pegram going to Craven, for example, Blackwell and Randolph going together over to Cohane. All rising sophomores will live in their linked quad for the 22-23 academic year. And you can form a roommate pair or block with any other rising sophomore from within your affiliated quad. So for Gilbert, Adams, and Southgate, for example, you both are paired together and you can select a roommate and or a block from anyone within those two buildings on East Campus, since you both are going over to FEW quad together. So when you hear your connecting quad or affiliated quad, any kind of language like that, this is specifically what we're referencing in terms of the quad that you'll be living in on West Campus. So who can be your roommate? Sophomores can identify another sophomore roommate from within their connecting quad, and that person can be of any gender identity. I do want to highlight really clearly that if you decide to go through the process without identifying a preferred roommate, one, it does not ensure you'll receive a single room assignment. And instead, it is highly likely that you would have a random roommate as the outcome of your room selection process. You might ask why that's the case. Well, the room selection process will happen by class year. So that means seniors and juniors will be able to select before our sophomores will. And more likely than not, they're going to select the single rooms that are available within that quad. So it is highly likely that as a sophomore, as a rising sophomore, you would have a roommate for the upcoming academic year. We want you to be in control of who you live with. And the best way to do that is to identify a preferred roommate on your housing application when it opens the week of February 7th. And who can be members of your block? And what is a block? So students on the housing application can form a block of 3 to 8 members. Those students, again, must be within the affiliated quad. But the goal of creating a block will allow the 3 to 8 of you to have the same time selection window when you are going to select your room later in March. So that means you all can enter at whatever that time may be. Let's say it's 7:05 p.m. on March 23rd. All 8 of you, or however many members are on your block, can enter the housing portal at the same time and see what rooms are available for the quad that you're assigned to, and then pick and decide together where each of you are going to live. So that's the benefit of blocking, is that you all get to have the same amount of vacancies at the same time to select from, and you don't have to wait for other members to pick after you or before you, etc. You all get to pick at the same time. Block members can be of any gender identity, and it's really important to remember that your roommate should also be a member of your block. So a block should be a component of all of the roommate pairs that you may want to be living with or near. So you may have one block of 8 members, but within that block, you could have 4 roommate pairs. You don't have to, but that could be one combination of what a block and roommate pair may look like. It's really important to note that even if you join a roommate pair and or a block, every individual person, regardless of their block status or roommate status, must complete a housing application. That is crucial. even if you accept invitations, and we'll show what that looks like in a few moments, but even if you select invitations and do not finish the application, you will not be able to go through the room selection process in March. You would have to wait for the summer to actually get assigned. So please make sure that everyone within the within your block submits the application in its entirety. All right, so next we are going to dive into the application and what it actually looks like. So you're going to see some screenshots here in a moment. The application itself, I hope, is pretty self-explanatory, but we will tackle each kind of question and what that means for your room selection process. But if you walk away from this information session with nothing other than when it opens and closes, then that is excellent. That's truly all you need at this point in time. So the application opens February 7th at 10 a.m. and it will close on February 14th at 12 p.m. and will be accessible online from wherever you may be at that point in time. The first part of the application is to identify your lifestyle preferences. And these should look familiar to you as you submitted and used these on your initial first year housing application that you completed last May. So these responses are used when we need to make manual roommate pair assignments. And you may right away know exactly who your preferred roommate is, and that's already set and determined. But sometimes things happen where the unexpected arises and maybe that person doesn't end up being your roommate for whatever the reason might be, in the fall semester or in the spring semester. And when we as housing assignments have to make roommate pairs, we, as much as we can, look very closely at these lifestyle preferences so we can try and make as many matches as possible based upon what is described or what you have responded with. These also will be visible to your peers through the room selection process. So if for some reason through the process you end up going into a double room on your own, and therefore there's another bed within that space that is empty that another student can come in and select into, then they'll be able to kind of click on your name in the room selection process and see what your lifestyle preferences are to determine at that point as well whether or not they are a good match for you as a roommate. The next section of the application are questions about you. So these responses are used also when we need to make manual roommate pair assignments and are pretty crucial to making sure we are pairing successful pairs together when possible. So you'll see the questions here that we will be asking. What I want to highlight specifically is your gender identity. This is a question that we've not asked before on our housing applications, and we're really excited to be moving forward with this approach. But we will be asking students for their preferred gender identity, and that will be visible to other students through the room selection process in the same fashion that I described before as it relates to lifestyle preferences. So if you go into a double room by yourself, like I mentioned before, and don't have that preferred roommate for whatever that reason may be, and someone comes in to select the bed within the room that you're assigned to, when they click on your name, they'll be able to see your preferred gender identity. But that's the only other information besides your Duke email that they would see at that point at the room selection level, and only for those students who might be in a double room by themselves at the point of room selection. Next, we ask some questions about your preferred roommate, specifically if you would be a good roommate to a student who identifies as transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, or with a marginalized gender identity or gender expression. So we're trying to make sure that we are pairing students together that will be successful, again, as we have with the other questions that we've been asking. And so these responses will also be used when we need to make manual roommate pair assignments. The next part of the application looks at living area preferences. So we ask you, what is your preference for a single room? Do you have a preference to live within a similar gender community? Do you have preference for access to an all gender bathroom? And what is your preference for substance-free housing? I'm going to talk about each of these a little bit and how they can impact your room selection process. I'm also going to be talking about all gendered housing and substance-free housing in more detail towards the end of this information session. So I'm just going to touch on how they can impact your room selection process at this point. So if you indicate that you do prefer a single room, it does not guarantee you will receive a single room whatsoever. Really, what this is telling us is just information that we can utilize to plan for moving forward so that we have a good idea of how many students really are preferring a single room and how many are not. If you have a preference to live within a similar gender community, well, what does that mean? So this is new language for us moving into the 22-23 academic year. And we are moving to an all gender housing model. So what that means is that students of any gender can live anywhere on West Campus with anyone of any other gender identity or with the same gender identity. We are also creating these communities within each quad that offer the opportunity for students of similar genders to live together as well. So if you indicate that yes, you would like to live within a community within your quad that are of students of a similar gender, then we will communicate with you in March where those specific locations within your quad will be. That way, when you're going through the room selection process, if that's something that's really important to you, you can pay attention to where those locations are at room selection and see what beds are available in those locations at that point in time. And if you have preference for an access to an all gendered bathroom, this does not impact your room selection process necessarily, but it does mean that we will specifically reach out to you in March and outline to you where the all gender bathrooms are within your quad so that when you're going through the room selection process, you can pay attention to the current vacancies and where the all gender bathrooms are and help that guide your decision making. And then last but not least, we ask what your preference is for substance-free housing. If you're not familiar with what that is, I'll also describe that more a little bit later in the information session. If you indicate a preference for substance-free housing, then we also will communicate with you in March, outlining where the substance-free housing locations will be within your quad. And again, you can use that information when you're going through the room selection process to select into a substance-free bed space if you want to, or you can also select into another space within that quad. So these preferences don't lock you in. They won't dictate exactly where you have to go at room selection, but rather it helps guide our communication with you to make sure you know where these locations are within the quad so you can make a better informed decision about where you want to live within your quad. The one thing I do want to highlight that is really important is if you do have a preferred roommate, your responses to these questions should match, right? If you have a preferred roommate, then that means the two of you will likely be going into a double room together and only one double room. So if you're going to be in the same room together, you want to make sure that your living area preferences within the quad also match. So both of you should want substance free or not want substance free. Both of you should want to live within a similar gender community or not want to. So be sure that you are having these conversations specifically with your preferred roommate if you haven't started that conversation already. For your block mates, that part doesn't matter as much that your living area preferences match, because while you'll have the same time selection window when you go through the room selection process, that doesn't mean you have to pick near one another. You certainly can, and I'm sure that that's the goal and hope for most of you, but it's not required. So you don't have to make sure that these living area preferences match as much as you should for your preferred roommates. And again, we'll talk more about each of these communities and what they are, what they mean towards the end of the information session. So next on the application, we very specifically ask, do you intend to form a block of 3 or more students? And do you have a preferred roommate regardless of your single room preference? These answers are really important. If you say no, I do not intend to form a block of 3 or more students, then you're not going to see that page in the application. If you say no, I don't have a preferred roommate, then you're not going to see that page in the application and not being able and therefore not be able to identify who those people are. So make sure these answers are correct and that you're taking your time as you go through the application, because it can impact, at least these two questions specifically, can impact what the rest of your application process looks like. So if you are just going through the process by yourself and you have no intent to form a block, or nor do you have a preferred roommate, then the next step is actually the last step for you. But if you do have a preferred roommate, and you say, yes, I have a preferred roommate, then you'll identify that on this next page that I'll show you right now. Forming a roommate pair. So you said yes to having a preferred roommate. You will be brought to a page that has a table on it where you get to either accept a roommate invitation if your roommate already went through the application, or you can create the roommate pair and invite your roommate to your group. It doesn't matter which of you are the leader in this instance. You just need to make sure that you are forming that pair together. And as a reminder, your preferred roommate must be a rising sophomore from within your quad affiliation. And this is really, really important. All invitations must be accepted in order to be a member of the roommate pair. So if we look at this first example where you see John Smith's group, we have John Smith, who's a leader, Matt Brown, who's a member, and Stephen Phillips is invited. Stephen Phillips would not be considered a member of this roommate pair. Also, this is a roommate pair, so in actuality, you wouldn't be able to have more than 2 members a part of it, but the image is provided as an example. So only John Smith and Matt Brown in this group would actually be a roommate pair and will be processed in our system as a roommate pair. Stephen Phillips, if the application closed on February 14th at 12 p.m. Eastern, and he, for whatever reason, did not go in and accept that invitation, he would not be a part of this group at all. He may be a part of another group. We can't tell necessarily from this image, but he could be a part of another group. But he would certainly not be a part of John Smith's group. It's also really important to note, you'll notice that John Smith has been invited to be a part of Phil Jamison's group. John Smith cannot join Phil Jamison's group unless he leaves his original group that he started with Matt Brown and Stephen Phillips. You can only be a member of one roommate pair group at a time. So if John Smith ultimately decided that Phil and Steve really were the people that he wanted to continue through the application process with, he would have to leave John Smith's group, the one that he created, and accept the invitation from Phil Jamison. Again, remember, this is just an example and it has 3 people within it, but for your roommate pair, you will only be able to identify yourself and one other person being your preferred roommate. On the next page, I'll show you exactly what it looks like when you're trying to search and find the person that you want to invite. But it's important to note that once you invite someone or once you accept an invitation, an email notification is sent to everyone who's already a member or leader of that group so that everyone's on the same page and knows exactly what's happening within the group at any time. You can also go back into the application at any point in time during that window while it's open from the 7th to the 14th and see the status of your roommate pair. And if your roommate has accepted the invitation or did they somehow leave and not tell you, if for some reason it kind of gets lost in your email, you can also go and have a visual look and see exactly what's happening with the roommate pair, which may be important to do if you're forming a block. Since a block can have up to 8 total people, so yourself and 7 other members to create a group of 8, that's a lot of people and potentially a lot of emails that may be coming at you. So I would certainly recommend going into the application itself just to take a look and see who hasn't accepted their invitation yet that really needs to, so you can text them or message them and try and get them into the housing application to do that. As a reminder, block members must be rising sophomores from within your quad affiliation. And again, all invitations must be accepted in order to be a member of the block. And the positive of forming blocks is that they allow for the same time selection window when you all go to pick your rooms later in March. You can see here that's my name, Krista Jones, that I formed a roommate group and I'm working on inviting my preferred roommate. So what I did was I clicked on the green invite button and this little table populated. I can search by preferred first name or last name, or what's the easiest is just to search by permanent email. There could be 4 different John Smiths if that's all that I typed, but there's only going to be one person within the Duke system who has that specific email address. So that's usually the easiest way to search. So you would type in their email in the permanent email field, click search, and for me, Christy Selena is populated, and then I can click select on that green check mark. And once I do that, it would populate, I'm gonna go back to this other table. It would populate here saying that her status was invited. And once I do that, select her, send the invitation, she'll receive an email at her Duke email account saying that she's been invited to Krista Jones's roommate group, and she should go into the application and accept that invite. So even if she already completed the application, she can go back into it and accept the invitation if she wants to, or decline the invitation if she wants to, all again through the application process. If at any point you feel like you're running into trouble in the while the application's open and this part just isn't working for you for some reason, feel free to message us at housing@duke.edu. Try and provide a screenshot when you can. More often than not, to be honest, the reason folks run into problems is they aren't trying to search by an email, but rather trying to search by preferred name or last name, and therefore get a lot of queries returned, a lot of people returned, and they don't know which one to pick. So it's really important to make sure you're trying to use permanent email and have the correct email, because sometimes that ends up being an issue as well. All right, and then here we are to the license and terms, which is the final step of the application. So you can go again back through the application as many times as you need, even once you hit finish on this last step of the application. You will receive an email confirmation every time you click this finish button, so just be aware of that. But you'll also receive email notifications for each roommate pair or block change that happens once you have become a member. One other item to note that I don't know if I specifically said already, but you do not have to form a block. You do not have to form a roommate pair. You can also only form a block and go through the process without a preferred roommate pair, or you can also just go through the process with your preferred roommate and not block at all. Any of those combinations are available to you as an option. If you were to do any of them though, I would strongly recommend that you identify a preferred roommate, kind of for the reasons that I've indicated before, in the sense that if you don't have one, you're kind of leaving it up to fate to either pick into a room where someone else has already been assigned, pick into a double room where someone else has already been assigned, or leaving up to fate to see who comes and picks into the room that you pick for yourself, into that vacant bed within that double room. And if anything else, we want you to have control over who you are living with next year. And the way to do that is to form a preferred roommate pair. So if you can, we really encourage you to do that. Now we are going to focus on these specific living areas within quads and what they mean in the process for you. So first, we're going to talk about living learning communities. We do have a list of them on our website. If you are a member of an LLC or you become a member of an LLC here in the next few weeks, your LLC advisor will actually provide housing assignments with a membership list. So once we get that membership list, we'll connect with you for further instructions. But you will be assigned where the LLC is housed. So if you are in an LLC that's in Craven and you become a member, even if your connection was to Few, you will now be going to Craven because that's where your LLC is housed and that's where you have become a member for. So keep that in mind. Your roommate, once you become an LLC member, must be another LLC member or a student connecting to your affiliated quad. So in that example that I referenced, if my affiliated quad was few, but I joined an LLC that's actually housed in Craven, I have two options for my roommate once I'm living in Craven. My roommate can be another LLC member with me, or it can be someone who's going to Craven Quad as a part of their affiliated quad. If more likely than not, if you're a member of an LLC, your advisor's already reached out to you to talk to you about your intent of living with the LLC and who you want your preferred roommate to be. So a lot of those communications are already happening. If you're unsure and maybe haven't heard anything, then I would encourage you to reach out to your LLC advisor so that we can ensure that the list that they're providing us in the next few weeks is as accurate as it possibly can be. You will still need to submit the housing application during the same application window as your non-LLC peer. So that would be during the February 7th to February 14th. Whether you're an LLC member or not, you still have to submit the housing application. So please don't forget that. We also will be emailing out daily to those students who have yet to complete the housing application. So that should help be a reminder for you as well. And of course, if you just are unsure, you can always reach out to us directly at housing@duke.edu. Selective living groups. So if you're a member of an SLG, then your housing liaison will provide us housing assignments with a membership list, very similar to the LLCs in that way. If you're on the list, then we will manually assign you within the selective living groups section of housing at their direction. So they usually tell us who is living exactly in which room and with whom. So you still need to submit the housing application during the application window as if you were not a member of the SLG and just going through the process without that membership. Then once we get the list from the membership list from the SLG liaison, we'll reach out to you to confirm your intent to live with that group and then process your assignment at the SLG's direction. Substance-free housing, I'm really excited to talk about this as well. So in years past, we've only had substance-free housing in one quad, and that was Wanamaker Quad. But moving forward as a part of Quad X, we will be offering substance-free housing within each quad on West Campus. So if you indicate that you have a preference for substance-free housing, then you will be asked to sign a contract to pledge to refrain from the use of alcohol, being under the influence of alcohol, illegal drugs and tobacco, and the abuse of prescription medications. So you will be committing to a substance-free lifestyle if that's what you choose to do. And you'll be able to do that regardless of what quad affiliation you're a part of. So this question had been coming up from a lot of your peers already about wanting this kind of option, but your affiliated quad wasn't Wanamaker. So what does that mean for you? And the outcome is that you can still participate in a substance-free housing lifestyle within your quad affiliation. So as long as you say that, yes, this is your preference, then we will send special communications to you in early March, letting you know where the substance-free option, where the substance-free housing community will be within your affiliated quad. And next, all gender housing, I apologize. So majority of space within each quad will have all gender housing. And this is where roommates may share similar gender identities and live on floors where students next door may not share their gender identity. Or you could also have very different gender identities with your roommate if that is your preference. Each floor with all gender housing configurations will also have gender non-specific and gender specific restrooms. So earlier in the application, I mentioned that preference of wanting an all gender bathroom option. And if you indicate that as a preference, then we will send you communications in early March of where those options will be within your quad. If you're interested in similar gender housing, each quad will also have options for areas where students of similar gendered roommates and neighbors. I see a typo there, apologies, it's tripping me up a little bit. But You will have the option to identify, I'm sorry, you'll be able to live with a roommate of a similar gender and have neighbors that are also a similar gender as your own within a specific area within the quad, and we'll communicate where those locations are to you on the housing application. Next, if you have a housing accommodation, which those are defined as accommodations provided directly from Student Disability and Access Office or as a part of a Title IX circumstance. So when I say housing accommodation, that's what I'm talking about. It usually results in a formal letter that is brought to our office from Student Disability and Access Office or Title IX. So if you have a housing accommodation, we are working on compiling and tracking who all of those students are, specifically for our rising sophomores. And we will be communicating with you before the housing application opens, specifically what your process is. So if, for example, you have a housing accommodation that we're concerned we may not be able to meet in your connecting quad, then we'll reach out to you directly to start having that conversation about what the options will be for you long term. We will also be reaching out to you and letting you know, hey, you have an accommodation for no carpet and your quad is no carpet. So you're good. You can pick any room, etc. And your accommodation can be met in your connecting quad. So you'll be hearing from us specifically regarding your accommodation in the next few weeks before the application opens. If you have a single room accommodation, please do not identify a roommate. You can certainly block, and that is certainly okay to block. But if you have a single room accommodation and you identify a preferred roommate, you're more or less leaving your preferred roommate kind of out in the cold to navigate and figure out whether or not they can find someone to live with in a double room at the time and point of room selection. So that's not really fair to your preferred roommate if you pair up with them in the application process and then you go into a space that can't have a roommate. Your preferred roommate, that student that you would in theory want to live with, they'll have to kind of be on their own now to find a roommate. We won't just put them in a single room or ensure that a single room is available to them. So if you do have a single room accommodation, please block. We encourage you to do that, but you should not identify preferred roommate. I also want to share that vast majority of accommodations will be able to be met within their connecting quad. For example, Eden's quad has a lot of rooms that has carpet within it, but there's also 20 to 25 rooms that do not have carpet. So if you have an accommodation for a room with no carpet, it can still be met within Eden's quad, even if the majority of the spaces may not meet exactly what you're looking for, which is also very much the case on East Campus as well for various different accommodations. So majority of accommodations will be able to be met with your connecting quad. So if that was a concern of yours, please do not worry, and we'll be in touch very soon about that moving forward. So, where can you learn more? This is the last part of our information session tonight. Our website is live and we have a ton of information on it. More details about blocking, more details about the application process, about the living learning communities, about all gender housing. Please go to our website. It's also been emailed to you at your Duke email address so you can access it easily and quickly. So that's one spot to learn more. Your residence coordinator is also an excellent resource, especially if you find that maybe you're struggling with determining a preferred roommate or other block members from within your current building on East Campus or your pair building. Your residence coordinator is a great resource. There will be upcoming events to kind of help bring about social opportunities for you and your communities. So they're an excellent resource in that regard as well. Over the next few weeks, before the application opens, housing assignments will be sending out quite a few emails with specific topics. One could be about substance-free housing. One could be about all gender housing, etc. And those communications will have also a lot more information written down for you if that's how you learn best by reading, so that you have that information available to you at your fingertips as well. And of course, if you have very specific questions that maybe are unique to you, you can always email us at housing@duke.edu and we would be happy to help. So again, as a nice gentle reminder, if you remember nothing else from tonight's session, please remember that the application opens February 7th and closes at 12 p.m. Eastern on February 14th. We will continue to email you once the application is live if you've not fully completed it. But please remember to submit that application. So I will kind of take a look at the chat, and if there's any themes, MJ or Nicole, that you would maybe like me to touch on, feel free to message me and I'm happy to discuss those. There was a question, it looks like, about how singles are distributed, and MJ did an excellent job answering that. So they are available for selection based on lottery number order after all SDAO accommodations have been met. So seniors will have the best and lowest lottery numbers available in the process. So seniors will pick first. Within that, we'll also make sure all of our single room accommodations are met, and seniors, juniors accommodations will really all be assigned to single rooms before the rising sophomores get to select. So that doesn't mean you won't get a single room, but it does mean that it's very limited for sophomores. I'm just perusing here on some other questions. If you apply for a single but don't get one, would you still be able to choose a roommate? So we strongly suggest that all students have a preferred roommate, even if you prefer a single room. And it specifically states that on the application as well, that simply going through the process without a roommate doesn't mean you're going to get a single, even if you preferenced it. And also, if you preference a single room, but have a preferred roommate, and there's a single room available to you when you go in to pick your room, then you certainly can pick into that single room, even if you have identified a preferred roommate. So one or the other doesn't really impact your process at room selection. So you should certainly identify a preferred roommate if you can, and if single room is your preference, certainly indicate that on the application also. Yeah, so how's the time slot of selecting room determined? So I'll talk about that briefly as well. I will highlight that that's the part that we don't necessarily want you to have to worry about or focus on right now. Much more details. We'll also be doing different information sessions for the room selection process in March. So once we get to the application closing and everyone kind of knows who their preferred roommate or block members are, then we'll start communicating in early March more details about that process. But lottery numbers are random and they are assigned after the housing application closes. As shared before, the lowest numbers go to seniors, then juniors, and then sophomores, and we'll be sharing more information about that in early March. Yes, and MJ clarified, thank you, regarding selective living groups, that sophomores cannot live in selective living groups due to the recruitment process. Excellent. Well, I thank you all for coming tonight and learning, hopefully lots of information. Sorry, I just had another question sent to me that I want to mention briefly. So it asks, can you apply to live in a quad that you were not assigned to, or pick a roommate from outside of your quad? And that answer is no. You have to identify preferred roommate from within your affiliated quad, and you have to identify blockmates from within your affiliated quad. And there is an appeals process that's available on our website if you feel as though you have a very convicting reason in which you don't think you should live within your connecting quad. And you can find that information directly on our website and outlined further. Oh, my favorite color is purple. Thank you for the question. And On average, how many bathrooms are in a block? Um, I'm not specifically sure what you're referencing to as block, but more often than not, there's actually, depending on the quad, there's two to anywhere from 2 to 3 bathrooms per floor. Majority of the time, that is the case. We do have some smaller floors that are in the basement, for example, that may only have 1 bathroom, but majority of our floors have 3 bathrooms. Another question, can a man and a woman live together? Yes, if a man and woman want to live together, then they can certainly form a roommate pair on the housing application and then select a room to live together once the application goes live. Excellent. All right, I'm actually going to close out now. Thank you all for joining tonight. This was recorded and will be posted on the website and housing portal along with a PowerPoint presentation for your reference as well. Thank you all for coming. Have an excellent evening, and we look forward to seeing your application soon.